The first thing my new neighbor ever said to me was something nobody in the building should have known. I had just finished carrying the last box into my apartment when someone knocked on my door. I assumed it was another neighbor coming to introduce herself, so I opened it without thinking. A woman around my age was standing in the hallway. She had dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail, a grocery bag in one hand, and a friendly smile. "Hi, I'm Aloan. I just moved into 4B. I smiled back. "I'm Kellen. 4A. She glanced past me at the boxes. "Still unpacking?" "Unfortunately." She laughed. Then her eyes moved toward the small wooden table beside my door. There was a framed photograph sitting on it. A picture of my grandmother. Aloan stared at it for a few seconds. Then she said, "She still looks exactly the same." I froze. "What?" She pointed toward the photograph. "Your grandmother. I remember that picture." My stomach tightened. "You knew my grandmother?" She immediately shook her head. "No." She paused. "I mean, I've seen her before." "Where?" She looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry. I must be mistaken." She turned to leave. I watched her walk toward the stairs. "Wait." She stopped. "How did you know that was my grandmother?" She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "You have her eyes." And she walked away. I stood in my doorway wondering what had just happened. I had never told her my name before she introduced herself. I had never told her the woman in the photograph was my grandmother. And nobody in the building knew anything about my family. At least, that's what I thought. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe she'd seen my grandmother somewhere. Maybe she'd mistaken the photograph for someone else. Maybe she'd simply guessed. But the next morning, she said something that made it impossible to ignore. I was leaving for work when Aloan stepped out of her apartment. "Morning, Kellen." "Morning." She locked her door and looked at the coffee in my hand. "Still taking it without sugar?" I stopped. I looked down at my cup. "How did you know?" She smiled. "You always drink it black." "I've never had coffee with you." She laughed nervously. "Maybe I saw you downstairs." "Maybe." I walked toward the elevator. She followed. Then she said, "You should probably start taking your lunch from home." I turned around. "Why?" "The chicken place near your office has been giving you stomach problems." I stared at her. "What did you say?" She looked surprised. "You mentioned it." I didn't. Her smile disappeared. Maybe someone else did. The elevator arrived. I stepped inside. She stayed in the hallway. Before the doors closed, she said, "Have a good day." I didn't answer. I went to work with a strange feeling in my chest. At lunch, I did something I hadn't done in months. I ordered from the chicken place near my office. I had stopped eating there because it always made me sick. I had never told anyone that. Not my coworkers. Not my friends. Nobody. I sat at my desk staring at the food. Then I threw it away. That evening, when I returned home, Aloan was standing outside her apartment. She was holding a package. She looked at me. "Did you eat there?" I froze. "Eat where?" "The chicken place." I felt my hands go cold. "How do you know where I went?" She looked away. I guessed. "You guessed the exact restaurant?" She didn't answer. I stepped closer. "Who are you?" She looked at me. For the first time, she looked genuinely frightened. Then she said something I didn't expect. "You shouldn't be asking me that." "Why?" "Because you don't know who else is listening." She opened her apartment door. I asked her to wait. She looked back at me. "Kellen, go inside." "Why?" "Because someone has been watching you." Then she closed the door. I stood in the hallway alone. I looked toward the stairs. Nothing. I checked the security camera near the elevator. It was pointed directly at me. For the first time, I wondered if Aloan had been telling the truth. I went inside my apartment and locked the door. I checked every window. Nothing looked unusual. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Don't trust 4B." I stared at the screen. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I checked the building's security footage with the manager. I asked him whether anyone had been hanging around my apartment. He said no. Then I asked him about Aloan. He looked at me strangely. "What about her? How long has she been living here?" He checked the records. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Yes. That didn't make sense. I had seen her moving in only 2 days earlier. I asked him to check again. He did. Her lease started 3 weeks ago. Was she actually living here? Apparently. I asked whether she had any visitors. He shook his head. Not that I know of. I thanked him and went upstairs. Aloan wasn't outside. I knocked on her door. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. I was about to leave when I noticed something on the floor. A small envelope. My name was written on it. I picked it up. Inside was a photograph. I knew the photograph immediately. It was one I'd never shown anyone. It showed me and my grandmother sitting together in a hospital room when I was 12. I had kept that photograph inside a locked drawer in my bedroom. Eloin couldn't have seen it. I turned it over. There was writing on the back. She told me you'd forget. I read it again. Then I heard the door behind me open. Eloin was standing there. She looked at the photograph in my hand. Her face went pale. Where did you get that? You left it here. She looked around the hallway. Then she pulled me inside her apartment. Closed the door. I did. Her apartment was almost completely empty. No furniture. No pictures. No decorations. Just several cardboard boxes stacked against the walls. I looked at her. How do you know my grandmother? She didn't answer. How do you know what I eat? Silence. How do you know about the photograph? She finally looked at me. Because your grandmother asked me to watch you. My heart stopped. My grandmother died 6 years ago. I know. Then how could she ask you? Eloin walked toward one of the boxes. She opened it. Inside were dozens of letters. Every envelope had my name on it. Some were dated years ago. I picked one up. The handwriting was familiar. My grandmother's. I opened it. There were only 2 lines. If Eloin ever comes to you, listen to her. My hands started shaking. I looked at her. Why didn't she tell me about you? Because she wanted to protect you. From what? Eloin closed the box. From the person who caused your grandmother's death. I stared at her. My grandmother died of cancer. Eloin looked at me. That's what your family was told. The room suddenly felt smaller. I asked her what she meant. She said my grandmother had discovered something before she died. Something about my family. Something that involved me. I asked what it was. Eloin didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to another box and pulled out an old newspaper. She placed it on the table. There was an article about a car accident from 12 years earlier. I recognized the names. My father had told me that accident was minor. Nobody had been seriously hurt. But the article said something different. One person had died. My mother's younger brother. I had never known he was in the car. Eloin pointed at the photograph in the article. Your grandmother believed that accident wasn't an accident. I stared at the page. Why? Because someone had tampered with the car. I looked at Eloin. Who? She shook her head. She never found out. Then why are you involved? Eloin looked at me for a long time. Because I was there. I couldn't speak. You were there. That night. How old were you? 17. She looked down. I was the person who found your uncle. I felt dizzy. Why didn't I know? Because your grandmother asked me to disappear. Why? Because she knew the person responsible was still looking for witnesses. I asked the question that had been sitting in my mind since I met her. Why did you move next door now? Eloin's eyes filled with tears. Because I found something your grandmother left behind. What? She pulled a small key from her pocket. It looked old. There was a number engraved on it. 27. She placed it in my hand. Your grandmother wanted you to have this when you were ready. Ready for what? Eloin looked toward the window. Then she whispered. To find out why your family lied to you. Before I could say anything, someone knocked on her door. 3 slow knocks. Eloin immediately grabbed my arm. She looked terrified. Don't answer. The knocking came again. Then a man's voice came from the hallway. Kellen, I know you're in there. I froze. I knew that voice. It belonged to my father. The same father who had been dead for 6 years. The voice outside Eloin's apartment made my entire body go cold. I hadn't heard my father's voice in 6 years, but I recognized it immediately. There was no mistaking it. Eloin put a finger to her lips and slowly moved toward the door. I whispered, that's my father. I know. I looked at her. How? She didn't answer. The knocking came again. Kellen, open the door. I stepped toward it. Eloin grabbed my arm. Don't. That's him. I know who it sounds like. I stared at her. What does that mean? She looked terrified. Your father isn't the only person who knows how to sound convincing. The voice outside came again. You've been lied to. I felt my chest tighten. Open the door. Eloin shook her head. Then she walked toward the kitchen. I followed her. She opened a cabinet and pulled out a small black device. What is that? A recorder. She pressed a button. A man's voice came through the speaker. It was my father. But this recording sounded different. He sounded older. Tired. Afraid. The recording said, if Kellen ever hears my voice again, tell him not to trust the person who claims to know me. I looked at Eloin. What does that mean? I don't know. The knocking suddenly stopped. We waited. Nothing. Then footsteps moved away from the apartment. I went to the window and looked down. A man was walking toward the parking lot. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I noticed something strange. He was wearing the same dark coat my father used to wear. I ran downstairs. Aloan followed me. By the time I reached the parking lot, the man was gone. There was only one car leaving the street. I tried to memorize the license plate, but I couldn't see it clearly. When I returned upstairs, Aloan was standing in the hallway. She looked at me. Did you see him? Only from behind. Then we're running out of time. I asked her what she meant. She didn't answer. Instead, she opened her apartment again and started packing the boxes. Where are you going? Somewhere safer. You can't just leave. I can, and I have before. I stopped her. You owe me answers. She looked at me. I know. Then tell me everything. She sat down on the floor. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she told me that my grandmother had contacted her 12 years ago. At the time, Aloan was 17 and working at a small diner near the highway. One night, my uncle came into the diner. He looked frightened. He told Aloan that someone was following him. He left a bag behind and asked her to give it to my grandmother if anything happened. The next morning, he was dead. Aloan found him near the road. Police called it an accident. My grandmother didn't believe them. She asked Aloan to keep quiet. Then she began investigating. What was in the bag? I asked. Aloan looked at me. Something that could have changed your entire family. What? A notebook? Where is it? I don't know. She said my grandmother had hidden it somewhere and refused to tell anyone where. But a few months before her death, she gave Aloan a letter. The letter contained instructions. If anything happened to my grandmother, Aloan was supposed to move into my building and watch me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She planned all of this before she died? Yes. Why? Because she knew someone would eventually come looking for you. Who? Aloan shook her head. That's what she was trying to find out. I remembered the key she had given me. What is 27 open? She looked at the key. Your grandmother never told me. I turned it over in my hand. There was another tiny number engraved on the back. 12. 27 and 12. Aloan stared at it. Then she stood up. Wait. She walked to one of the boxes and pulled out a notebook. She flipped through several pages. What? Your grandmother mentioned numbers. What numbers? She wrote down 27 and 12. I looked at her. Where? She showed me the page. There was a sentence written in my grandmother's handwriting. The answer is between 27 and 12. I read it several times. What does that mean? Aloan shook her head. I never understood it. I thought about it. Then something came back to me. My grandmother used to take me to an old train station when I was a child. She always said there was a bench where she used to wait for my grandfather. I remembered the number painted on the bench. 27. I told Aloan. She immediately grabbed her coat. Let's go. We drove to the old station. It was almost abandoned. The building had been closed for years. The platform was covered with weeds. We found the bench. The number 27 was still painted on it. I searched underneath. Nothing. Then I noticed a small metal plate attached to the back. It had the number 12. I looked at Aloan. She took out the key. It fit into a tiny lock. The plate opened. Inside was a folded piece of paper. I pulled it out. It was another letter from my grandmother. Kellen, if you are reading this, then Aloan finally found you. I looked at her. She looked surprised. The letter continued. There is something I never told you about the night your uncle died. I kept reading. He wasn't alone in the car. My hands started shaking. There was another person with him. Someone who survived. Someone who later disappeared. Someone my grandmother believed was still alive. The letter didn't give the person's name. Instead, it gave an address. I recognized the address immediately. It was the house where my father had lived before my parents divorced. I hadn't been there since I was a teenager. Aloan looked at the address. We need to go there. We drove in silence. When we arrived, the house looked abandoned. The windows were covered. The garden had grown wild. I walked toward the front door. It was unlocked. Inside, everything smelled old and damp. We searched the rooms. Nothing. Then Aloan noticed a photograph hanging crookedly on the wall. It showed my father standing beside my uncle. There was another person in the photograph. A young woman. I didn't recognize her. Aloan did. She stepped backward. What? She pointed at the woman. That's my mother. I stared at her. Your mother. Aloan nodded. My mother disappeared the same week your uncle died. I looked at the photograph again. My father's arm was around her shoulder. I suddenly realized something. My father hadn't just known Aloan. He had known her family. I asked her why she had never told me. Because I didn't know. Then why are you here? She looked at the photograph. Because now I think my mother was the person who survived that accident. Before I could respond, we heard something upstairs. A floorboard creaked. Someone was inside the house. We turned toward the staircase. Another creak. Then a man's voice came from upstairs. Kellen. I recognized it immediately. It was my father's voice again. Aloan grabbed my hand. We slowly moved toward the stairs. A man appeared at the top. He was older. His hair was gray. His face was partly hidden by the darkness. But when he stepped into the light, I knew him. My father. He looked directly at me. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Your grandmother was right. You were never supposed to find this house." I couldn't move. I whispered, "Dad." He nodded. Then he looked at Aloan. And his expression suddenly changed. "You brought her here?" Aloan looked confused. "Why are you afraid of me?" My father didn't answer. Instead, he said something that made my blood run cold. "Because your mother is still alive." My father stood at the top of the stairs, looking at Aloan as if he had seen a ghost. I couldn't take my eyes off him. For 6 years, I had believed he was dead. Now he was standing only a few feet away from me. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but only one came out. "Why did you let me believe you were dead?" My father looked at me. "Because if you knew I was alive, they would have come after you." "Who?" He glanced toward the windows. "The same people your grandmother spent years trying to expose." Aloan stepped forward. "And my mother?" My father looked at her. "Your mother is alive." Aloan's face changed. "Where is she?" "I don't know. You just said she's alive." I said I believe she's alive. Aloan shook her head. "You knew her?" My father looked away. "I knew her a long time ago." I looked between them. "What is going on?" My father walked downstairs and sat at the old dining table. He looked exhausted. Then he told us a story I'd never heard before. 12 years earlier, my uncle had discovered that someone was secretly moving money through several small businesses in our town. He thought it was financial fraud. He was wrong. The money was connected to a network of people who had been helping witnesses disappear. Some people were disappearing because they were in danger. Others were disappearing because someone wanted them silenced. My uncle found the connection by accident. He told my father. My father tried to convince him to stop investigating. He refused. Then my grandmother got involved. She believed the person controlling the network was someone close to our family. My father wouldn't tell me who. I asked him directly. "Was it Mom?" He looked at me. "No." I felt relieved. Then he added, "But your mother knew more than she ever admitted." My stomach dropped. "What did she know?" "She knew your uncle was in danger." "Why didn't she tell me?" "Because she was trying to protect you." I looked at Aloan. She was listening carefully. My father continued. "The night your uncle died, he wasn't supposed to be driving alone." Aloan stepped closer. "My mother was with him." My father nodded. "Yes." "What happened to her?" "She survived." Aloan's eyes filled with tears. "Then where did she go?" My father looked at her. "She disappeared because someone tried to kill her." "Who?" "I don't know." "You expect me to believe that?" "No." He looked down. "I expect you to understand that I was scared too." The room became silent. I asked him why he had disappeared. He said that after my uncle died, he found evidence that someone inside the family was giving information to the people responsible. He couldn't figure out who. Then my grandmother warned him. She told him that if he stayed, everyone he loved would become a target. So he disappeared. He left my mother. He left me. And he made everyone believe he was dead. I couldn't forgive him that easily. "You could have called me." "I wanted to." "Then why didn't you?" "Because they were monitoring you." I shook my head. "How?" My father pulled a small envelope from his coat. Inside were photographs. There were pictures of me leaving school. Me at work. Me with friends. Me entering my apartment. Some of them were taken years ago. I felt sick. They were watching me all this time? Yes. I looked at Aloan. "Then why did you move next door?" She answered before my father could. "Because your grandmother asked me to." My father shook his head. "No." We both looked at him. "Your grandmother didn't ask her to move next door." Aloan stared at him. "Yes, she did." "No." My father stood up. "Someone used your grandmother's letters to make you believe that." Aloan's face went pale. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying those letters may not be real." She stepped backward. But I saw her handwriting. So did I. My father walked toward the box. He took one of the letters and examined it. Then he looked at me. "Your grandmother's handwriting was copied." I felt a chill. Who could copy it? My father didn't answer. He looked at Aloan. Someone who knew her very well. Aloan whispered. My mother. My father nodded. Possibly. Aloan looked devastated. My mother wouldn't do that. Then ask yourself why she disappeared. She turned away. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Then I noticed something on the floor. A small black notebook. I picked it up. There was a name written on the cover. My grandmother's name. I opened it. Most of the pages had been torn out. Only a few remained. One page contained a list of dates. Another contained names. And the final page had one sentence. The person watching Kellen is not the person he should fear. I looked at my father. What does that mean? He took the notebook from me. I don't know. You always say you don't know. Because there are things I never discovered. He turned toward the window. Then he said something that made Aloan suddenly look at me. The person you should fear is the one who wants you to believe Aloan is protecting you. I looked at her. She looked confused. What does that mean? My father said, I don't know whether she's protecting you or leading you somewhere. Aloan looked hurt. You think I'm using him? I'm saying someone may be using you. She shook her head. I came here because his grandmother asked me to. Maybe? What do you mean, maybe? My father walked toward the front door. We need to leave. Why? He pointed outside. A black car was parked across the street. The same car I had seen near my apartment. My father immediately turned off the lights. Don't go near the windows. We waited. The car stayed there. Nobody got out. After several minutes, it slowly drove away. My father watched it disappear. Then he said, They found us. I asked where we could go. He said there was an old motel outside town where he had been staying. We left the house through the back entrance. On the way there, Aloan barely spoke. I could tell she was thinking about what my father had said. When we reached the motel, my father gave us a room key. I need to make a phone call. He walked away. Aloan sat on the edge of the bed. I don't trust him. I looked at her. He's my father. I know. You think he's lying? I think everyone is lying. She looked at me. And that's what scares me. I sat beside her. Then tell me something only you and my grandmother could know. She thought for a moment. Then she told me about a small red box my grandmother kept in her bedroom. She said my grandmother used to hide it inside an old sewing machine. I remembered it immediately. When I was a child, I had seen that box. But I had never known what was inside. Aloan said the box contained something my grandmother was terrified of. What? A photograph. Of what? Your mother. I looked at her. That's it? No. She lowered her voice. Your mother wasn't alone in the photograph. Before I could ask anything else, the motel room door opened. My father walked inside. He was holding a piece of paper. His face was completely pale. I asked him what happened. He handed me the paper. It was a recent photograph. It showed my mother standing outside a grocery store. Alive. The photograph had been taken 3 days earlier. On the back was a message. She wants to meet her son. I looked at my father. Where? He pointed to the bottom of the photograph. There was an address. It was the exact address of my grandmother's old house. The house had been empty since her death. Aloan looked at the photograph. Then she whispered. That's where my mother disappeared. My father nodded. And that's where your grandmother hid the red box. I suddenly understood why everyone had been afraid of that house. The truth wasn't hidden in some secret organization. It was hidden inside our own family. And someone had just invited me back to the place where everything had started. The address on the photograph kept running through my mind as we drove toward my grandmother's old house. Nobody spoke much. My father kept checking the rearview mirror. Aloan sat beside me, holding the photograph of my mother with both hands. She had stared at it for almost 20 minutes. Finally, she whispered, I don't understand. What? If your mother is alive, why did she let me believe she was dead? My father answered from the driver's seat. Because she wanted you to stay away from her. Aloan looked at him. That's what you said about Kellen. I know. So, how do I know you're not lying again? My father didn't answer. That silence bothered me more than anything he could have said. When we reached my grandmother's house, the place looked exactly as I remembered it. The old wooden fence was leaning to one side. The garden was completely overgrown. The porch light was broken. I hadn't been there since the funeral. My father parked across the street instead of in front. Why aren't we going closer? Because if your mother really wants you here, she already knows you're coming. We walked toward the house. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open. The smell immediately brought back memories. My grandmother's house had always smelled like old books, cinnamon, and furniture polish. But now there was another smell. Fresh coffee. Someone had been here recently. Eloan noticed it too. Someone's inside. My father nodded. We moved through the hallway. Nothing appeared disturbed. Then I saw something on the kitchen table. A cup. Still warm. Next to it was a handwritten note. My name was written on it. I picked it up. Come upstairs alone. I looked at my father. He immediately shook his head. No. I turned toward the staircase. I need to know if she's here. You don't know who's waiting upstairs. But if it's Mom? He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, I'll stay at the bottom. I walked upstairs alone. Every step reminded me of being a child. My grandmother used to sit in the bedroom at the end of the hallway and read to me. The door was open. I pushed it slowly. Nobody was inside. But the old sewing machine was sitting near the window. I walked toward it. The red box was still there. I opened the drawer beneath the machine. Nothing. I checked the cabinet. Nothing. Then I noticed something unusual. The machine had been moved slightly. I pushed it aside. There was a small wooden panel underneath. I lifted it. A hidden compartment appeared. Inside was the red box. My hands were shaking when I picked it up. I opened it. There were photographs, letters, a small key, and a cassette tape. I looked at the photographs first. The first showed my grandmother when she was young. The second showed my mother. The third showed my father. Then I found one that made me stop. It showed my father standing beside Eloan's mother. They were much younger. They were standing outside the same building where I now lived. I turned the photograph over. There was a date. 20 years ago. Eloan had followed me upstairs. She saw the photograph. Her face went pale. That's my mother. I nodded. Your father knew her. She looked at me. Maybe more than you think. Before I could respond, my father called from downstairs. Kellen. His voice sounded urgent. We went down. He was standing near the front door. There is a car outside. I looked through the window. A gray sedan was parked across the street. My father recognized it. It's the same car. Eloan asked, what do we do? My father looked at the red box. Take it. Where? Somewhere they can't find it. I asked him who they were. He didn't answer. Instead, he took the cassette tape from the box. This is why your grandmother was afraid. What's on it? I don't know. Then let's listen. He shook his head. Not here. We moved into the basement. There was an old cassette player on a shelf. My grandmother had kept it for years. My father inserted the tape. At first, there was only static. Then my grandmother's voice came through. I hadn't heard her voice in 6 years. Hearing it again nearly broke me. She said my name. Kellen, if you're hearing this, then something happened to me. I closed my eyes. She continued. I need you to understand that your father didn't abandon you. My father looked down. My grandmother explained that she had discovered someone inside the family was giving information to an outside group. She didn't know who, but she knew the person had access to private family information. She said she suspected my mother. Then she said something that made me look at my father. I was wrong. The recording continued. Your mother wasn't helping them. She was trying to stop them. I looked at Eloan. She was crying. My grandmother said that the person responsible had used my mother's name to hide what they were doing. She also said that the person had been close to our family for years. Then the recording stopped. The tape clicked. My father tried to restart it. Nothing. That's it. He shook his head. No. He turned the tape over. There was another side. We played it. My grandmother's voice returned. This is the part one never told anyone. She sounded frightened. The person responsible isn't a stranger. There was a pause. I've known them my entire life. Then she said a name. I almost dropped the cassette player. It was someone I knew. Someone I had trusted. Someone who had been around our family for years. My father's closest friend. Gideon. I looked at my father. Your friend? He didn't answer. Eloan asked, who is Gideon? My father's best friend. Where is he now? My father looked toward the basement door. I don't know. Then we heard footsteps upstairs. Slow. Careful. Someone was walking through the house. My father immediately turned off the cassette player. We stood silently. The footsteps stopped. Then someone called my name. Kellen. I recognized the voice. It wasn't my father. It wasn't Eloan. It wasn't my mother. It was Gideon. My father's best friend. He called again. Kellen, I know you found the box. My father whispered. Don't move. Gideon walked downstairs. He appeared at the bottom of the steps. He looked at my father. Then he smiled. You finally found it. My father stepped in front of me. What do you want? Gideon looked at the red box. I want what your mother stole from me. My grandmother had never stolen anything from him. At least, that's what I thought. Gideon took one more step. Then he looked directly at me. Your grandmother wasn't trying to protect you from me. He paused. She was trying to protect you from your mother. Eloan immediately stepped forward. That's a lie. Gideon smiled. Ask her yourself. He pointed toward the basement window. We all turned. A woman was standing outside. My mother. She was staring directly at me. And in her hand was a photograph of Eloan's mother. I couldn't move when I saw my mother standing outside the basement window. For 6 years, I had believed she was gone from my life. Now she was standing only a few feet away, holding a photograph of Eloan's mother. Eloan moved toward the window. My mother. My mother looked at her. Then she slowly raised one finger to her lips. Don't speak. Gideon noticed her too. He smiled. Looks like she finally decided to come back. My father stepped toward him. What did you do to her? Gideon laughed quietly. Nothing. She did exactly what she needed to do. I looked at my father. What does that mean? He didn't answer. My mother knocked on the basement window. Once. Then twice. It was a signal. My grandmother had used the same signal when I was a child. My father understood immediately. He opened the basement door. My mother entered. For several seconds, nobody spoke. She looked at me. Her eyes filled with tears. Kellen. I wanted to run toward her. Instead, I stood still. Is it really you? She nodded. I asked why she had stayed away. She looked at my father. Because he told me to. My father shook his head. I was trying to keep you alive. You were trying to control everything. I was trying to protect our son. My mother looked at me. Your father wasn't the one who caused the accident. I looked at Gideon. He was standing near the stairs, watching all of us. My mother continued. The person who caused that accident was trying to scare your uncle into giving them the notebook. What notebook? The one your grandmother mentioned. I looked at the red box. My mother nodded. Your grandmother found it after your uncle died. What was in it? Names. Whose names? People who had been involved. She looked at Gideon. He smiled. She's leaving out the important part. My mother turned toward him. Don't. Gideon stepped closer. Tell him who gave the names to your mother. My mother went silent. I looked at her. Who? She finally said. Your father. I looked at him. He didn't deny it. I felt betrayed all over again. You gave them names? I was trying to expose them. You put my family in danger. I thought I could control it. My mother shook her head. You couldn't. Gideon laughed. Nobody could. I asked Gideon why he was involved. He said he had known my father since they were young. They had worked together for years. But eventually, my father wanted to leave. Gideon didn't. He believed the network could be used to help people. My father believed it had become corrupted. They fought. Then my uncle found the notebook. Gideon wanted it. My father tried to protect it. My grandmother hid it. And my mother became the person caught between all of them. I asked Gideon why he had come to the house. He looked at the red box. Because the notebook is inside. I opened the box. There was no notebook. Gideon's expression changed. Where is it? My father looked at my mother. She smiled faintly. It's not here. Gideon stepped forward. Where is it? My mother looked at me. Kellen has it. I froze. What? She pointed toward my jacket. I reached into the inside pocket. I pulled out a small black notebook. I had never seen it before. I looked at my father. He looked shocked. Eloan stared at me. Gideon moved toward me. My father blocked him. Don't. Gideon stopped. I opened the notebook. The first page contained a list of names. Some were crossed out. Others had dates beside them. Then I saw my own name. Under it was a date. Next to the date was a sentence. The final witness. My hands started shaking. I looked at my mother. What does this mean? She walked toward me. It means they knew you had seen something when you were a child. What did I see? The night your uncle died. I shook my head. I wasn't there. You were. My father looked away. I remembered suddenly. A dark road. Rain. Headlights. My uncle's car. And a woman standing beside the road. I had forgotten all of it. My mother said I had been too young to understand. My grandmother had spent years making sure I didn't remember. Because the woman I saw that night was the person who had been inside the car. Eloan's mother. I looked at Eloan. She looked just as confused as I was. My mother. My mother nodded. She survived. Eloan whispered. Then why did she disappear? My mother looked at her. Because she was the only person who knew what really happened. Gideon suddenly moved toward the door. My father noticed. Where are you going? Gideon didn't answer. He opened the basement door. Then stopped. There was someone standing outside. A police officer. Gideon turned around. For the first time, he looked frightened. The officer walked inside. He looked at my father, then at my mother, then at Gideon. I think it's time we all talked. Gideon looked at me. This isn't over. The officer stepped toward him. It is now. Gideon was taken outside. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. Because after he left, the officer came back downstairs and handed my father a sealed envelope. This was found in Gideon's car. My father opened it. Inside was another photograph. It showed my grandmother, standing beside a little girl. I looked closer. The little girl was Aloan, but there was something written on the back. I didn't find her by accident. Aloan took the photograph. Her hands began shaking. What does this mean? My mother looked at her. Then she said something none of us expected. Your grandmother raised you for 3 years. Aloan stared at her. What? My mother explained that after Aloan's mother disappeared, my grandmother had secretly taken care of Aloan. She had kept her hidden from Gideon and the others. Aloan had eventually been placed with another family. But my grandmother had never stopped watching over her. That was why she trusted Aloan. That was why she had asked her to protect me. I looked at Aloan. She was crying. I don't remember her. My mother said. You were too young. Then Aloan noticed something else in the photograph. A small mark on the wall behind them. It looked like the number 27. She turned toward me. The key. I pulled the key from my pocket. My mother immediately understood. The key isn't for the box. Then what is it for? She looked toward the old hallway. The room your grandmother never let anyone enter. We went upstairs. At the end of the hallway was a locked door. I had seen it many times as a child. My grandmother always told me it was broken. I inserted the key. The lock opened. Inside was a small room filled with photographs. Hundreds of them. My family, my uncle, my father, my mother, Aloan, and me. Someone had been documenting our lives for decades. On the desk was a final letter from my grandmother. I opened it. It said, Kellen, if you have reached this room, then the person I trusted to protect you has finally returned. I looked at my mother. The letter continued. Do not trust the person standing beside you. I stopped reading. Everyone looked at everyone else. Then I noticed one final line. The person who knows the truth is not your mother, your father, or Aloan. I turned the page. There was a name. I read it. Then I looked up at the person standing behind me. I suddenly realized who my grandmother had been warning me about. I slowly turned around. The person standing behind me was someone I had completely forgotten was still in the house. The police officer. He was standing in the doorway, watching me. My father immediately stepped between us. What are you doing up here? The officer didn't answer. He looked at the letter in my hand. Then he smiled. Your grandmother always did like leaving puzzles. I felt a chill. I looked at my mother. She had gone completely pale. You know him? She nodded slowly. He was there the night your uncle died. The officer looked at her. That's not exactly how I remember it. My father stepped closer. What's your name? The man smiled. You've known my name for 20 years. He reached into his jacket. My father immediately moved toward him. But the officer pulled out a photograph instead of a weapon. He placed it on the desk. It showed my grandmother standing beside him. They were outside the same house. The date on the photograph was from 15 years ago. I looked at my mother. Who is he? She whispered his name. Silas. The name meant nothing to me. My father looked like he'd just seen a ghost. You were supposed to be dead. Silas laughed. So was I. He explained that he had once worked with my father. He wasn't a police officer back then. He was an investigator who helped expose illegal financial networks. But when he got too close to the people behind the network, someone tried to eliminate him. My grandmother helped him disappear. Then he spent years searching for the person who betrayed him. I asked why he had been pretending to be a police officer. He said because it was the easiest way to get close to people without making them suspicious. You've been watching me? Yes. Why? Because your grandmother asked me to. I looked at the letter. Then why did she say not to trust you? Silas smiled. Because she knew you would ask that question. I didn't understand. He explained that my grandmother had never trusted anyone completely. She had created a series of instructions so that no single person could control the truth. My father had one piece. My mother had another. Aloan had another. And Silas had the final piece. But there was one problem. Gideon had stolen part of the evidence years ago. The missing piece was the reason everyone had been searching for my family. I asked what was missing. Silas pointed toward the photograph of Aloan's mother. Her testimony. Aloan looked at him. Where is my mother? Silas looked at her. She's closer than you think. Alohan's breathing changed. What does that mean? Silas didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the desk. He picked up an old photograph. It showed my grandmother, my mother, my father, and another woman. The woman was Alohan's mother. But there was someone else in the background. A young girl. Me. I was standing beside my grandmother. I stared at the photograph. I was there. My father nodded. Yes. Why don't I remember? Because you were told to forget. I looked at him. Who told me? My mother stepped forward. I did. I couldn't believe it. You made me forget? Not exactly. She explained that after the accident, I had suffered severe emotional shock. I kept asking about the woman I had seen. I kept describing her. My grandmother feared I would accidentally reveal what I had seen. So they told me the woman was someone else. Over time, I forgot. Or at least, I thought I did. Silas said that wasn't the biggest problem. The woman you saw wasn't just a witness. He looked at Alohan. She was the person who took the notebook. Alohan stared at him. My mother. Silas nodded. Your mother took it to keep it away from Gideon. Then why did Gideon say she was working with him? Because he wanted everyone to believe that. Alohan looked at the floor. My mother saved the evidence. Yes. Then why didn't she come back for me? Silas hesitated. Because she believed coming back would put you in danger. Alohan wiped her eyes. I asked Silas where she was now. He finally answered. At the old train station. The same station where Alohan and I had found the first letter. We left the house immediately. My father drove. My mother sat beside him. Alohan and I sat in the back. Silas followed in another car. When we arrived at the station, it was nearly midnight. The place was completely dark. We walked onto the platform. There was an old waiting room at the end. The door was open. Inside was a single chair. And someone was sitting in it. Alohan stopped breathing. Mom? The woman slowly stood. She was older now. Her hair was gray. But there was no doubt. It was her. Alohan ran toward her. They hugged. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. I stood back. I watched my mother crying quietly. My father looked away. The woman finally looked at me. Kellen. I nodded. You remember me? She smiled sadly. You were 12. I shook my head. I remember the road. She closed her eyes. Then your grandmother was right. I asked her what happened that night. She said my uncle had discovered the network. He had planned to expose it. But someone betrayed him. The accident was arranged. She was in the car with him. She survived. My uncle didn't. Before he died, he gave her the notebook. She hid it. But Gideon found out. That's why she disappeared. I asked her who had arranged the accident. She looked at my father. Then my mother. Then she looked at me. The person who ordered it wasn't Gideon. I felt a chill. Then who? She took a deep breath. It was someone in your family. Nobody spoke. She continued. Your grandmother knew the truth. I looked at the old photograph in my hand. Who was it? She looked directly at me. Your grandfather. I stared at her. My grandfather died before I was born. I know. Then how could he have ordered it? She shook her head. He didn't. I felt completely lost. Then who? She reached into her bag. She pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a photograph. It showed my grandfather. Alive. Standing beside a woman I had never seen before. The date was only 3 years before my birth. On the back was one sentence. Your grandfather had another family. I looked at my father. He was crying. I had never seen my father cry before. He whispered. That's the secret my mother spent her entire life hiding. I asked who the woman was. My father looked at Alohan's mother. She answered. Your grandfather's second wife. Then she handed me another photograph. It showed a young man standing beside her. I recognized him. It was Gideon. My father's closest friend. But he wasn't just my father's friend. He was my grandfather's son. My father's half-brother. I couldn't speak. Everything suddenly connected. Gideon wasn't simply protecting a network. He believed our family had stolen his father's life. He had spent decades trying to destroy the family he believed had abandoned him. But then Alohan's mother said something that changed everything again. Gideon wasn't the person who ordered the accident. I looked at her. Then who was? She pointed toward the photograph of my grandfather. His son. I looked at Gideon. Then at my father. My father whispered. That's impossible. The woman shook her head. There were 2 sons. Silas suddenly stepped forward. Your father knew about the second one. My father stared at him. What are you saying? Silas looked at me. The man you have been calling your father isn't your biological father. The room went silent. I looked at my father. He couldn't look at me. And for the first time in my life, I realized the family secret wasn't about who had betrayed us. It was about who I actually was. I couldn't speak after Silas said those words. The man I had called my father my entire life was standing only a few feet away from me, but suddenly I felt like I didn't know him at all. I looked at him. Is that true? He didn't answer. That silence was enough. My mother started crying. Kellen, please. I stepped away from everyone. So I'm not your son? My father finally looked at me. You are my son. That's not what I asked. He closed his eyes. My mother was involved with someone before she married my father. I looked at him. Who? He hesitated. Then he said the name. Gideon's father. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. I looked toward Aloan's mother. She nodded. Your grandmother knew. How? Because she discovered the truth after you were born. I couldn't understand why everyone had kept this from me. My father explained that my biological grandfather had been a powerful man who had created much of the network my uncle later discovered. But he wasn't the person who ordered the accident. That person was his other son, Gideon's older half-brother, a man who had disappeared years ago. I asked where he was. Silas answered. He's dead. I stared at him. Then why are we still in danger? Because his work didn't die with him. He explained that the network had continued operating through people who had never been identified. Gideon had spent years trying to find the missing evidence. He believed that evidence would prove his brother's innocence. But my grandmother had hidden the truth because she knew the evidence would destroy several families, including ours. I asked what was inside the notebook. Silas looked at Aloan's mother. She answered. Names. Only names? No. She reached into her bag and pulled out several folded papers. Confessions. Each paper contained a statement from someone connected to the network. People admitting what they had done. People describing meetings. People naming the person who gave them instructions. And one confession contained a name that made my father go completely silent. I recognized it immediately. Gideon. But underneath his name was another name. A name I had never heard before. My mother looked at it. That's the man we thought was dead. Silas nodded. He wasn't. I looked at him. Who is he? Silas took a long breath. Your grandfather's first son. I suddenly understood. Gideon wasn't the oldest. There was another brother. A man who had disappeared after the accident. A man everyone believed had died. I asked where he was. Silas said nobody knew. But the confession contained one clue. A location. The old family estate. We drove there before sunrise. The house had been empty for years. My father told me my grandfather had owned it before he died. When we entered, everything was covered in dust. There were old paintings on the walls, furniture covered with sheets, and photographs everywhere. I walked through the hallway. Then I saw something. A photograph of my grandfather with 3 children. My father, Gideon, and another boy. The third boy had his face scratched out. I touched the photograph. Who did this? My father looked at it. My mother. Why? Because she wanted everyone to forget him. We searched the house for hours. Finally, Aloan found a locked cabinet. The key from my grandmother's red box opened it. Inside was a collection of letters. Most were from my grandfather. The last one was addressed to my father. It said, if anything happens to me, do not let my first son find Kellen. I read the sentence again. Why was he looking for me? My father finally told me the truth. Because I wasn't just a witness. I was the only person who could identify him. I had seen him on the night of the accident. I was 12. I had forgotten his face. But my grandmother had spent years trying to make sure I would eventually remember. That's why she left the flowers. That's why she contacted Aloan. That's why she created all those clues. She knew that one day, I would be old enough to understand. Then we heard a noise outside. Someone was walking around the house. My father turned off the lights. We waited. A shadow passed the window. Then another. Silas moved toward the back door. Someone's here. We stayed silent. A minute later, the front door opened. A man walked inside. He was older. Tall. Gray hair. He looked around the room. Then he called my name. Kellen. My father grabbed my arm. Don't answer. The man walked farther into the house. I know you're here. His voice was calm. Almost friendly. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. I've been waiting 20 years for you to remember me. I looked at Aloan. She looked terrified. The man continued. Your grandmother told you lies. He stopped in front of the old photograph. You were never supposed to survive that night. My father stepped forward. Leave him alone. The man laughed. You still think you're protecting him? My father said nothing. The man looked directly at me. You want the truth? I nodded. He told me that on the night of the accident, my uncle had been carrying the notebook. He had planned to give it to the police. But someone intercepted him. That person wasn't Gideon. It wasn't my father. It wasn't my mother. It was the man standing in front of us. He admitted that he had caused the accident. But he claimed he never intended to kill anyone. He said the brakes were supposed to fail slowly. My uncle panicked. The car crashed. Alohan's mother survived. My uncle didn't. And I had seen everything. I remembered suddenly. The rain. The headlights. My uncle shouting. A man standing near the car. His face. I remembered. I whispered his name. He smiled. Now you remember. My father stepped toward him. But Silas stopped him. We need him alive. The man laughed. You still don't understand. He pulled a small envelope from his coat. He threw it on the table. Inside was a photograph. It showed my grandmother. She was standing beside him. I looked at the date. It was taken only months before her death. My grandmother had been meeting him. My entire life, I had believed she was trying to protect me from him. But she had been meeting him secretly. I looked at Alohan's mother. She whispered. She was trying to negotiate. The man nodded. Your grandmother wanted you protected. From you. No. He looked at my father. From your father. Everyone went silent. My father stared at him. What are you talking about? The man said. Your father knew what happened that night. My father shook his head. I wasn't there. You didn't have to be. The man explained that my father had made a deal years earlier. He agreed to keep the notebook hidden in exchange for my safety. But when my grandmother discovered the truth, she refused. She wanted everything exposed. That's when she started leaving the clues. The flowers. The letters. The key. Everything was designed to lead me to the truth. But there was one final secret. The man looked at me. Your grandmother didn't die naturally. My mother covered her mouth. My father closed his eyes. I couldn't breathe. What are you saying? He looked at me. Someone helped her die. I stared at my father. He looked broken. Then the man said, and the person who gave her the final dose was standing beside you at her funeral. I looked around the room. My mother. My father. Alohan. Silas. Alohan's mother. Nobody moved. Then I noticed something. A small blue ribbon tied around the man's wrist. The same kind my grandmother had used. The same kind Alohan had used. The same kind that had appeared outside my apartment. I suddenly understood. The flowers hadn't been warning me about a stranger. They had been warning me about someone close. Someone who had been guiding me toward the truth while pretending to protect me. I looked at my father. He was crying. And he whispered, Kellen, I'm sorry. My father's words were barely audible, but they were enough to make everyone in the room go silent. Kellen, I'm sorry. I stared at him. For what? He couldn't answer. The man standing across the room smiled. Now you're finally asking the right question. I looked at my father again. Did you hurt my grandmother? He shook his head. No. Then why are you apologizing? He wiped his face. Because I knew what was happening and I didn't stop it. My mother stepped toward me. Your father was threatened. By who? She looked at the man in front of us. By him. The man laughed. That's only half the truth. He admitted that he had threatened my father years earlier, but he hadn't killed my grandmother. He had only convinced my father that keeping silent would protect me. My father believed him. That was his mistake. My grandmother had discovered the truth and started leaving clues for me. She knew she didn't have much time. She knew someone close to the family was helping the person who wanted the evidence destroyed. But she never knew exactly who. Then Alohan suddenly looked at the blue ribbon around the man's wrist. That ribbon. Everyone looked at her. She explained that her mother had seen the same ribbon the night my uncle died. But it wasn't worn by the man who caused the accident. It belonged to someone else. Someone who arrived afterward. Someone who helped remove the evidence from the car. I looked at my mother. She was staring at the ribbon. Then she whispered, I know who it belonged to. My father looked at her. Don't. She ignored him. It belonged to Gideon. I felt a strange sense of relief. For a moment, everything seemed to make sense. Gideon had been involved. He had helped cover up the accident. He had manipulated people. He had been searching for the notebook. But then Silas said something that changed everything. Gideon didn't wear that ribbon. We all looked at him. He pointed at the man standing across the room. He did. The room went silent. The man slowly removed the ribbon from his wrist. It belonged to my mother. I looked at him. What? He explained that the ribbon had belonged to his mother, who had been connected to my grandfather's second family. Gideon had stolen it years ago. Then the man had taken it back. It had become a symbol of the family secret. I asked him one final question. Why did you keep coming after me? He looked at me for a long time. Because your grandmother believed you had the final piece of evidence. I didn't. You did. He pointed toward the photograph I had been carrying. The photograph of the accident. I looked at it again. There was something I had never noticed. In the reflection of the car window was a license plate. I had always thought it was part of the road behind the car. But it wasn't. It was a vehicle parked nearby. My grandmother had enlarged that photograph before she died. She had circled the license plate. Silas took the photograph from me. He immediately recognized the number. It belongs to Gideon. Everything went silent. Gideon had been the missing piece all along. But there was another problem. Gideon was already gone. We had seen him taken away. But he had escaped before reaching the station. Silas immediately called for help. My father told me to stay inside. But I refused. I had spent years being protected from the truth. I wasn't going to hide anymore. We found Gideon at the old train station. He was standing on the same platform where Aloan had found her mother. He looked exhausted. When he saw me, he didn't run. Instead, he handed me a small envelope. Your grandmother wanted you to have this. I opened it. Inside was a final letter. It was written only a few days before she died. Kellen, if you have found this letter, then you finally know enough to make your own decision. I kept reading. I spent years believing I could protect you by hiding the truth. I was wrong. My eyes filled with tears. She wrote that my father had made mistakes. My mother had made mistakes. Aloan's mother had made mistakes. Even she had made mistakes. But none of them were responsible for the accident. The person responsible was Gideon. Not because he wanted revenge. Not because he wanted money. But because he believed our family had stolen something from his mother. He had spent years trying to punish people who weren't responsible. My grandmother ended the letter with one sentence. Don't let someone else's anger become your future. I looked at Gideon. He didn't look dangerous anymore. He looked tired. Broken. He admitted everything. He had helped cause the accident. He had hidden evidence. He had watched my family for years. He had even manipulated people into believing my father was dead. But he denied hurting my grandmother. He said she died naturally. He had only been waiting for me to find the evidence. Silas arrived with the police. Gideon didn't resist. As they took him away, he looked at me. Your grandmother was right about one thing. What? You deserve to know who you are. I didn't understand. He smiled sadly. You're not the person your family's secrets made you. Then he walked away. Months passed. The investigation finally uncovered what had happened. My father's name was cleared. My mother stayed in contact with me. Aloan and her mother slowly rebuilt their relationship. And I stopped feeling like I had to solve every mystery around me. One evening, Aloan and I returned to my grandmother's house. We cleaned the old rooms. We opened the windows. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel frightening. It felt peaceful. I found one final envelope inside the old sewing machine. It contained a photograph of my grandmother holding me when I was a child. On the back she had written, "Some truths hurt when you find them. Some truths save you." I kept the photograph. Then I finally understood why my new neighbor had known things about me that I had never told anyone. She hadn't been spying on me. She had been following my grandmother's final instructions. She had been protecting me from a secret that had started long before I was born. And the strangest part was that when I first met Aloan, I thought she was the person I needed to fear. Instead, she became the person who helped me find the truth. My father eventually told me that he had spent 6 years hiding because he believed staying away was the only way to keep me safe. I told him I understood. But I also told him that protecting someone by lying to them can become another kind of damage. He agreed. For the first time, we were able to talk honestly. I never forgot what happened. But I stopped letting it control my life. And every time I passed the old train station, I remembered my grandmother's words. Don't let someone else's anger become your future. That was the last lesson she ever gave me. And maybe it was the most important one. Would you forgive your family after discovering they had hidden the truth from you for years?